He loved his mistress. His family treated me like help. After I was reborn, I remembered everything. The lies, the theft, the silence they forced on me. But this time I didn't beg. I vanished quietly, and came back published, powerful and untouchable. The first time I heard Adrian recite love poetry in English, I had to stop myself from reacting. He sat with perfect posture in the living room, his voice smooth, the cadence deliberate, as if every syllable was a brushstroke he took pride in. Your love is not like theirs. Your love is much greater. You set me free. Celeste Zhang sat beside him on the floral print couch, legs tucked under her, beaming like she was auditioning for the part of a cherished muse. She let out a gentle laugh, one hand covering her mouth. You're doing this on purpose, Adrian. You know I blush easily. Adrian smiled. And I enjoy watching it. I lingered by the doorway unnoticed. My hands were dusted with flour from the dumpling dough I had been kneading. My sleeves rolled to the elbow, my hair tied up to keep sweat from pooling at the base of my neck. And in the living room, an entirely different world. They looked like they belonged in a magazine. I looked like the housekeeper. It wasn't always like this. In our last life, the one Adrian would never admit to remembering, I was his wife. Not just his wife, but the woman who bore his children, who cooked for his family until my hands blistered, who stayed behind while he went abroad with Celeste and never once invited me. Back then he'd read English aloud too, but only to his students or his children or to Celeste. Never to me. I watched as Celeste leaned forward, brushing something off his collar. Her fingers lingered too long. Her voice was syrupy. Did you translate that one yourself? Adrian chuckled. I mixed a few lines from Neruda and Tagore. You know I can't resist adding a twist. She clapped softly. It sounds even better when you say it. I didn't interrupt. I had learned how to be invisible in their world. Just then Adrian's mother bustled in through the side door. Her arms were laden with a tray of neatly sliced mango and dragon fruit. Without a word, she placed it between Adrian and Celeste, beaming. Then she turned to me. Her face stiffened. What are you standing there for? She barked. Go rinse the greens. Celeste's here, you should be making something nice. I nodded and walked to the kitchen. The green beans were still untrimmed. She threw them beside me with the same flourish she reserved for tossing out trash. I said nothing. In my past life I might have smiled and bowed and thanked her. I might have told myself that I owed them for taking me in after my parents died. That it was gratitude, not shame, that I owed. But this time I knew better. This wasn't kindness. It was erasure. I rinsed the vegetables with steady hands, focusing on the feel of the water rushing over my fingers. Liana, Adrian's voice called from the other room, slice some of the cured meat. Celeste likes it. Uncle sent it just for us. The word us rang in my ears. I opened the cupboard slowly, took out the vacuum-sealed pack and set it on the cutting board. My hands were gentle, precise, but my heart thudded like war drums. Celeste's preferences. Celeste's favorite poems. Celeste's laughter in his arms. In 30 years of our last life, Adrian never once asked what I liked. He never once remembered my favorite foods. Not even during the years I lost my appetite from grief and stress. I remember once asking him to bring home strawberries. He came back with bananas and a lecture about wasting money. Now he knew every nuance of Celeste's palate, how she liked her tea, which poems made her blush. I hadn't married him in this life. And I never would. I turned to finish dinner not because they deserved it but because I needed time. A little more time. Just until a knock interrupted my thoughts. I wiped my hands and stepped out, already guessing who it might be. Sure enough, Mr. Lee from the local school stood outside, breathless and smiling. Miss Chen, he greeted, lifting a slightly crumpled envelope from his folder. I rushed over as soon as the results arrived. Congratulations. My fingers trembled. He held it out, beaming. Jinghua University. Top 10 in the nation. You did it. My mouth opened. But no words came out. I pressed the envelope to my chest and nodded instead. You've brought great honor to our school, he added. The official admission letter will arrive from the university by month's end. I'll help you apply for the scholarship forms too. I managed a quiet, thank you. Then I glanced over my shoulder. The voices from the living room carried through the thin walls. Laughter. English. Celeste's sing-song tone. Adrian's low chuckle. I turned back to Mr. Lee. When the letter arrives, Please don't send it here. Hold it at the school. I'll pick it up. He blinked, surprised, then gave a slow, knowing nod. Of course. I'll hold it for you personally. I held my breath until he left, then let it out all at once. This time I would not let them take my future from me. In the last life I had shown Adrian my acceptance letter to another school. His reaction had been swift and casual. Your uncle's still sick. Your siblings need help. Wait till I graduate. Then I'll support you. I waited. Years passed. His promises disappeared with every promotion. When I finally brought up college again, he'd said, "What for? You're too old now." He made it seem like he was doing me a favor. He made me believe that love was sacrifice. And I, stupid, loyal, and full of misplaced pride, believed him. This time no more. I walked back to the kitchen and picked up the cleaver. The chopping board welcomed me like an old friend. Thud, thud, thud. The sound echoed. Celeste giggled from the living room. She's going to blunt that knife. Adrian's voice floated out. She means well. She just doesn't know when to stop. I bit down on my tongue. After dinner I served them without a word. I set the bowls down and returned to the kitchen without waiting to be thanked. Nobody offered. Back in my tiny bedroom, the converted storage room with a window no wider than my forearm, I sat on the floor, the envelope clutched in my hand. Jinghua University. In my last life I never got the chance. This time I would burn every bridge if I had to. The moonlight poured through the sliver of glass above me. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind replayed the sound of Adrian reading to Celeste, and my own voice whispering the lines he never bothered to learn for me. There is a kind of love, they say, that returns with every lifetime. But this time I wouldn't return to him. The next morning I woke before dawn. The house was quiet except for the occasional snore from Adrian's father. I slipped out of bed and packed the rest of my things into a worn duffel bag. Clothes, my dictionary, my practice notebooks, and the envelope Mr. Lee had given me. I wrapped that envelope in a scarf and placed it at the very bottom. I had no intention of showing it to anyone in this house. They didn't need to know. Not yet. I made breakfast like I always did, scrambled eggs, congee, and scallion pancakes. When I called everyone to the table, no one noticed the subtle shift in my energy. Adrian appeared last, yawning. "You're up early." "Old habits," I replied. He nodded vaguely and sat beside Celeste, who had spent the night in the guest room. She wore one of Adrian's old university hoodies which she'd borrowed and never returned. Her hair was loose, her smile smug. "I'm thinking of retaking the TEFL," she said to no one in particular. "Professor Wu says I have a good shot at Oxford this year." Adrian perked up. "You should. Your speaking has improved a lot. I'll help you prep again like last time." Celeste beamed. "Only if you promise not to flirt during the listening exercises this time." They laughed. I poured tea in silence. "You should study something too, Liana," Adrian said, suddenly remembering I existed. "Maybe cooking school. You've got talent with a knife." Mia, his younger sister, snorted. I set the teapot down gently. I was accepted to Jinghua. The table fell silent. Celeste paused with her spoon halfway to her mouth. Adrian blinked. "You've what?" "I was accepted," I repeated calmly. "Jinghua University. This year's class." Adrian leaned back in his chair, processing. "And when were you planning to tell us this?" "I just did." He laughed. The kind of laugh people give when they think you're being dramatic. "Liana, come on. You've always said you'd wait until I settled. Until the house was steady. You can't just drop everything and go. What about Mom? What about Mia and Kevin? What about them?" I asked evenly. He set his chopsticks down. "You're the only one they listen to. You're the one who cooks, manages the bills, shops for their clothes, takes them to appointments. All of which I've done unpaid, unsupported, and unseen," I said quietly. Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Where would you even stay? You think life in Jing City is easy? Rent's insane. Food costs double. You've never even left this county." I didn't answer. He pressed on, his voice sharper now. "You're doing this to pressure me, aren't you?" "No. Because if you think this will push me into something, like marriage or guilt, you're mistaken. I told you before, you and we're not compatible like that. Celeste and I don't want to marry you, Adrian." He shut up instantly. "I want to leave. That's all." The silence that followed was somehow more insulting than any word. I returned to my room, locked the door and tucked my duffel beneath the bed. That night I stayed awake, rehearsing the route to the bus station in my mind. My plan was simple. Wait for the official acceptance letter to arrive at school, pick it up personally and leave for Jing City. But the letter never came. Not the next day. Not the day after. On the fourth day I walked to the school and found Mr. Lee outside the admin office. "Oh, Miss Chin," he said, looking troubled. "I was just going to contact you." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" "The university says your admission is pending. There's a problem with the paperwork. They claim your records had inconsistencies, no signature confirming receipt of the original letter." "That's not possible," I said immediately. "They said I was accepted." "They did. But something's off. And they won't clarify over the phone." "Can I get a copy of the dispatch? The postal log? Anything?" He looked hesitant. "That might take a few days. I'll go to the post office myself." He opened his mouth to object, then nodded. "All right. Just be careful, Miss Chin. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong." When I returned home that evening, Adrian's mother was waiting on the steps. "You went to the school again?" she asked, squinting into the fading light. "Don't you have chores to finish?" "I was following up on something. Must be some nonsense dream again." She sniffed. "Honestly, all this schooling, where's the time to get married and raise a family?" I said nothing. That night I heard Adrian whispering to Celeste in the next room. "Don't worry about her. She's always had these moments. She gets worked up over things she doesn't understand. Jinghua was probably just being polite." Celeste giggled. "So dramatic." I clenched my fists in the dark. 2 more days passed. Then finally a breakthrough. At the post office an older clerk remembered my name. "We delivered a letter to your registered address from Jinghua. Signed for by, let me check." He flipped through the ledger. "Wu. Adrian Wu." The room tilted. "Can I see the receipt?" asked my voice calm. "Why?" He had no authority to sign for it. The man looked uncertain, but after I showed my ID and school affidavit he brought out the carbon copy slip. Adrian's signature was scrawled across the recipient line. Confident, lazy, unmistakable. The fury that rose in me wasn't loud. It was cold. Pure. Diamond-etched. I walked out of the post office and headed straight home. Adrian was in the courtyard playing cards with his siblings. Celeste was seated on a stool nearby, painting her nails. I stepped right into their circle and dropped the signed receipt in Adrian's lap. "What's this?" he said, barely looking. "Explain." He read it once. Then smiled. "You're being dramatic again. You forged my name." I signed for a letter. "So what? The enrollment deadline is this week. You knew that." He leaned back in his chair. "Even if I did, what difference does it make? It's too late now." Celeste smirked. I stared at him, unable to comprehend how he could look me in the eye and still act like he'd done nothing wrong. "You ruined my future." He snorted. "Your future? Don't flatter yourself, Liana. Jinghua isn't going to save you. You can barely keep up with the bills here and you think you belong in university? Come on." I couldn't breathe. "This house gave you food, shelter. And you go chasing nonsense dreams just to, what? Make us feel guilty." My voice was barely above a whisper. "I wanted to study. That's all. And I wanted a little peace," he snapped. "I'm tired of playing nursemaid to your ambition. You were supposed to stay here. Take care of things. Be part of the family. Instead you try to run every time things get hard." I stared at him. Really stared. And in that moment it clicked. The way he switched tones when cornered. The way he twisted sacrifice into manipulation. The way he always said you should be grateful when I tried to leave. He remembered too. Just like I did. He had been reborn. And yet, even with a second chance, Adrian Wu was still the same man. I thought I had seen the worst of betrayal. I hadn't. After the confrontation in the courtyard I spent the next 2 days in a haze. Rage and helplessness mixed like oil and water, coating every thought. I barely ate. I barely slept. I couldn't even look at Adrian's face without remembering the way he had said it. Even if I did, what difference does it make? He had robbed me of Jinghua. But I wasn't the same girl he had married in that past life. And this time I was going to find out just how far they were willing to go. I returned to the post office, then the school district office, then finally took the train to Jing City myself. If they thought I would just lie down and surrender, they had picked the wrong version of me to betray. Tsinghua University's campus was a world away from the dusty alleys I came from. Clean-cut students in pressed uniforms, professors in tweed jackets, flowers blooming along perfectly trimmed paths. I should have been walking there as a freshman. Instead, I arrived with a knot in my chest and a folder full of evidence. The admissions office was busy, students flitting in and out with questions about housing and schedules. I waited my turn. Next. I stepped forward. Hi. My name is Liana Chen. I applied for this year's freshman class and was accepted in early spring. But I never received the official admission letter. I have reason to believe it was intercepted, and worse, that someone else enrolled under my name. The woman behind the desk raised an eyebrow. That's serious. Do you have your candidate number? I handed it over. She typed, then frowned slightly. According to our records, a student named, yes, Liana Chen, was admitted under this candidate number. But that student has already registered and attended orientation. My throat went dry. That's impossible. That student isn't me. The woman hesitated. You'll need to speak to our supervisor. Wait here. 10 minutes later, a tall man in a gray jacket stepped out and motioned for me to follow. We sat in a smaller office away from the noise. He read my file quietly, then asked, "Do you have identification?" I handed him my ID. He compared it to a scanned photo in the system. His brow furrowed. The photo on our file doesn't match this ID. No, it wouldn't, I said. Because it's not me. What are you suggesting, Ms. Chen? I'm suggesting someone used my name, my records, my scores, my future. He folded his hands. Do you have any proof of this claim? I have this. I pulled out the signed delivery slip from the post office and a printed copy of the score confirmation I had received from Mr. Lee. And I have a guess who it might be. He skimmed them, expression unreadable. There's a student on campus named Iris Tao, I said. I believe she's the one using my name. He finally looked up sharply. You're accusing Iris Tao, daughter of Tao Wei, the county commissioner? I'm accusing whoever is enrolled under my name. Whether that's her or someone else, investigate it. He leaned back slowly. These are serious accusations. And political ones. If you're mistaken. I'm not. He didn't answer. I left the building half expecting security to escort me out. But no one stopped me. No one said a word. 2 days later I got my answer. I received a message from an old friend still living in Jing City. She sent me a photo taken on campus. A girl standing proudly under a red Tsinghua University banner, smiling, holding a student ID. The name on the ID? Liana Chen. But the girl in the picture wasn't me. It was Iris Tao. Her family was rich, connected, respected. Her father, Tao Wei, had been in office since I was a child. Everyone knew his name. And she had taken mine. I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. A memory flashed. Iris Tao had once come to our school. Her father had donated computers. She didn't even take the entrance exam, she didn't need to. In my past life, I remembered a quiet scandal around a girl named Iris. Rumors of cheating. An anonymous student reported her. The university hushed it up. She quietly dropped out. And now she was here, wearing my name like a borrowed dress. I returned to the university the next morning, this time with my chin lifted and my fury sharpened into clarity. I want to speak to the president's office, I said. You need an appointment. Tell them it's about identity fraud, I said. Tell them someone is enrolled under the wrong name. After an hour of waiting, I was turned away. Come back in a week. But I didn't leave the city. I found a cheap hostel near the train station and stayed. During the day, I returned to the university. At night, I compiled every document I could get my hands on. Copies of my application, my high school scores, my ID, the delivery logs. It wasn't enough. And back at the Lin household, Adrian and Celeste had started their own campaign. Rumors. I started getting texts from classmates. Old schoolmates. A few whispers from the county. Is it true you tried to steal someone's spot at Tsinghua? Why would you fake your own identity? Celeste says you were always jealous. That you forged scores. It didn't take long for the gossip to reach campus. Even the receptionist at the dorm office stared at me differently now. The final blow came one afternoon in the student commons. I was passing through the lawn when a voice rang out behind me. Well, if it isn't the real Liana Chin. I turned. Iris Tao stood in the sun, wearing a tailored pink dress, her hair in soft waves. Her eyes sparkled with venom. What do you want? I asked. I want to know what you think you're doing, slandering me to the administration. I'm not slandering. I'm correcting. She walked closer, voice lower. Look, I don't care what sob story you're spinning, but you're not getting Jinghua. Not now. Not ever. Why? I asked. Is it because it's the only thing you couldn't buy with Daddy's money? Her smile faltered for just a second. I continued, my voice calm. You took my name. My future. All because you didn't earn yours. She stepped closer. You're going to regret this. You don't know who my father is. I know enough, I said. And I'm not afraid of him. She scoffed, turned, and walked away. By that evening, new rumors flooded the campus. This time, that I was a mental case. That I had made up the acceptance. That I'd been stalking Iris for years and trying to ruin her life. I walked through the halls like a ghost. The stairs followed me. The whispers trailed like smoke. Even the university's security guard looked twice at me now. So I didn't back down. I gathered everything I had and filed a formal complaint to the Ministry of Education's Anti-Fraud Bureau. I included a note at the end. You can overlook a name. But don't overlook the truth. I sealed the envelope with shaking hands. That night I returned to the hostel and sat on the bed, my hands trembling over my knees. In my last life I had let them walk all over me. This time I was standing. Even if I stood alone. By the end of the week, I had earned a reputation I never asked for. Selfish. Dishonest. Mentally unstable. A liar. At Jinghua University, truth moved slower than gossip. And Adrian and Celeste knew exactly how to weaponize that delay. They started small, whispers through mutual classmates from our county, subtle suggestions that I had faked my scores or bullied Celeste for years. That I'd grown obsessed with Adrian and was now lashing out because he'd chosen someone better. Then came the public sympathy campaign. Adrian posted a long message on his class forum. We took her in after her parents died. My mom treated her like her own. But some people are never grateful. I wish her well, truly, but it's time to let go of bitterness and move on. He attached a soft photo of his mother, pale in bed, a tray of medicine beside her. The caption, she keeps asking for her. But she won't even visit. The post spread like wildfire. By Monday I couldn't walk across campus without being stared at. Is that her? She abandoned the family who raised her. Some people don't deserve kindness. At first I thought it would blow over. Kept my head down. Focused on my studies. Waited for the investigation. But the attacks became physical. When I returned to my dorm room that evening, the stench hit me first, sharp and chemical. My mattress was soaked with ink. Black, sticky blotches covered the sheets. My textbooks were torn to shreds. One had been stabbed straight through with scissors. A note was taped to the wall in thick red marker. You don't belong here. Drop out. I stood there, gripping the doorframe. A lump rose in my throat, but I swallowed it. I wasn't going to cry over a vandalized bed. My roommate, Lina, walked in behind me, her eyes widening. Holy crap, what the hell? I didn't speak. I just stepped forward and began picking up what remained of my notes. I didn't see who did it, she said awkwardly. But people have been talking. I know. She hesitated. Do you think it's true? About the family that raised you? I looked up at her, my voice steady. I cooked for them, cleaned for them, deferred my dreams for them. And they still think they're the ones who were kind. She blinked, unsure of what to say. I didn't blame her. When I reported the incident to the dorm supervisor, she clicked her tongue and said, "You should move to another room. You're disturbing the harmony of this one." I almost laughed. Harmony. What a beautiful word, used to justify so much silence. I moved my things to a smaller room on the top floor. Closet really. But it had a door. A lock. For white walls that didn't judge me. I taped my damaged acceptance slip above my bed. Jinghua University. My name. My future. The next day someone threw water at me in the library. I had just found a seat by the window when something cold and sudden hit the back of my head. I turned. A girl in a beige hoodie stood with her arms still raised, an empty cup in her hand. "You disgust me," she spat. "Pretending to be someone you're not. taking a seat someone else earned. I earned mine. She stepped closer. No, you didn't. Iris told us everything. There was. Iris Tao. The girl narrowed her eyes. You're not Leonichin. You're a sad, bitter girl playing victim for attention. I tilted my head. Funny. I could say the same to her. What's that supposed to mean? I pulled out my student ID. This says I'm Leonichin. And yet she's the one walking around using my name. Shut up. No. I stood. The library was suddenly still. Students were watching. Why don't you ask Iris how she passed her exams? I said, voice louder now. Why don't you ask who signed for my letter? The girl hesitated. Her certainty faltered. I stepped forward. She used my name. My records. My identity. And now she wants me gone so no one finds out. Liar, she hissed. But the doubt had already spread. I walked out without another word. That night I filed a formal complaint to the university president. This time directly. I attached every document I had. My original ID, exam scores, the post office receipt, and a notarized letter from Mr. Lee confirming my school registration. At the bottom of the packet I wrote, I do not need favors. I need fairness. I hand-delivered the envelope to the administrative wing. Then I walked to the campus garden and sat alone on a stone bench under a ginkgo tree. The autumn leaves had just started to turn. Yellow against silver. My fingers trembled. My mind screamed. But I stayed still. I thought of the last life. The version of me who stayed home while Adrian flew to England with Celeste. Who memorized poems at night hoping he'd ask her to recite one. Who died waiting. Not this time. Not again. A soft voice broke the silence. You're Leonichin, aren't you? I turned. A girl, short, round-faced, nervous, hovered near the path. Yes, I said cautiously. She stepped closer. I saw what happened in the library. You were brave. I said nothing. She offered a small envelope. I overheard something. Iris Tao paid off someone in the admin office. I don't know if this helps, but you deserve to be here. I opened it. Inside were printed chat screenshots and a brief handwritten note. A Mr. Rin in Records Department accepted payment for changing digital files. I stared at it. Proof. Finally something solid. Thank you, I whispered. The girl blushed and rushed away. I held the envelope tightly. I wasn't sure what would happen next. But I knew one thing. This house, this university, this identity, it wasn't theirs. It was mine. And I would reclaim it brick by brick, word by word. 2 days after I slipped the final envelope under the president's door, I received a call. Miss Chen. The voice was cautious, bureaucratic. This is Director Lee of the University Disciplinary Committee. Could you come in tomorrow morning for a formal hearing regarding your identity case? I nearly dropped the phone. Yes, I said, voice shaking. I'll be there. That night I couldn't sleep. I went over every document again. My ID, the post office slip, my handwritten affidavit. I packed them in a worn folder and taped the edges shut like a fragile treasure chest. But before I closed my bag I added something else. A short essay I'd written on impulse the night before. Titled, The Name I Didn't Give Away. It wasn't part of any report. Just mine. A quiet truth spilled in my own language, untouched by the mouths of others. The hearing took place in a cold administrative hall with metal chairs and windows too high to see out of. I was seated across from 4 university officials. Their expressions unreadable but their postures stiff, like people preparing for damage control. On the far side of the room Iris Tao sat next to her father, Commissioner Tao Wei. Her face was pale and pinched. She didn't look at me once. Mr. Rin from the records office sat 2 seats down, visibly sweating. The vice president cleared his throat. Miss Chen, after reviewing your submitted evidence, conducting an internal audit of the admissions department, and verifying the post office delivery logs, we've confirmed that your identity was used fraudulently to enroll another student. Silence fell. Even Tao Wei's mouth twitched. As such, Iris Tao's enrollment will be revoked immediately. Iris stiffened. Her father's jaw clenched. We will also be issuing formal suspensions to the individuals involved, including Mr. Rin, who accepted unauthorized payments to alter university records. Mr. Rin wilted in his chair. I swallowed hard. What about the overseas exchange program? The vice president exchanged a glance with the others. Mr. Adrian Wu and Ms. Celeste Zhang have both been removed from the list due to violations of conduct and falsified recommendation letters. That hit harder than I expected. Even though I'd fought for it, even though they deserved it, part of me still reeled at how far the damage had reached. Tao Wei rose. This is politically motivated. You're trying to humiliate my family. The vice president cut him off. Your daughter used someone else's identity to enter this institution. This is about integrity, not politics. He turned to me, tone softer. Miss Chen, on behalf of Jinghua University, we deeply regret what happened to you. You may continue your studies here as a rightful member of our community. I blinked. Just like that. I had won. The news spread faster than even the rumors had. The university posted an official notice. Iris's name was scrubbed from the registrar. Mr. Ren's desk was emptied before the week's end. But the real explosion came when the People's Tribune published my story. Somehow the essay I'd included in my file, the name I didn't give away, found its way into a journalist's hands. Mr. Zhao from the student press had passed it along, believing it deserved a wider audience. The article ran with a headline that made my hands tremble. She stole my name, but I kept my voice. The subhead read, How One Girl Fought Back Against Identity Theft, Power and Silence at China's Top University. They kept most of my words intact. My voice, raw and real, spilled across 4 full columns, describing what it meant to serve others for years and be discarded the moment you dreamed. Within days, the exposé went viral. Not just in the city. Nationally. Hashtags started trending on Weibo. Hashtag Lianachan Speaks became a rallying cry for young women across the country. Girls wrote to say they too had been told to be grateful when men robbed them of opportunity. That they had been told to shrink, to disappear, to hand over credit for their work with a smile. I read those messages through tears. I had fought so long just to be seen. Now suddenly It was in the midst of this storm that a new envelope arrived. Thicker than the rest. Foreign stamp. Cream-colored stationery. I opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter in looping cursive, printed on official University of Cambridge letterhead. Dear Miss Chen, I came across your translated essay through an academic contact. I must say, it moved me deeply. Not just for the content but the clarity and strength of your voice. Your English is not only grammatically sound but emotionally resonant. As a professor of comparative literature, I often find myself searching for voices that bridge cultures, not simply languages. Yours does. I would be honored if you'd consider submitting translated work to the Literary Translation Initiative here at our faculty. Should you be interested in applying to our Visiting Scholar program in the future, I would gladly write a letter of sponsorship. Sincerely, Professor Daniel Reyes, Chair Faculty of Arts and Letters, University of Cambridge. I sat in silence for nearly an hour. I read the letter again. And again. This wasn't about Adrian. Or Celeste. Or even Iris anymore. This was about me. My words. My fight. My voice. For years I had written and translated in secret. Jotting lines behind cupboard doors. Memorizing sonnets while peeling vegetables. Dreaming of foreign cities from the floor of a storage room. Now, a professor across the world had heard those same words and called them worthy. I began translating again, this time with purpose. I picked a novella from my late father's bookshelf, one he used to read out loud before he fell ill. I rewrote each chapter slowly, soaking in every nuance, every shadow, until the English version felt just as alive as the original. And then I wrote something new, my own story, fictionalized but real in every way that mattered. It was about a girl who spoke 2 languages. One for survival and one for dreams. Every night I sat at my desk and wrote until my fingers ached. Not for recognition. Not for revenge. But because I finally understood something I had never allowed myself to believe. My voice was mine. I no longer needed Adrian to read poems beside me to feel literary. I no longer needed Jinghua's name to feel smart. I no longer needed anyone to tell me I was worthy of this life. I had already earned it, word by word, fight by fight. A month later, I received an invitation from the Ministry of Education's Cultural Affairs Division to speak at a youth conference on academic integrity and gender equity. I walked onto that stage in a simple navy dress, clutching my cue cards. The room was packed. Lights overhead. Cameras recording. But I wasn't nervous. I looked out at the sea of students and said, "They took my name. They erased my future." But I kept writing. I translated their betrayal into a language I could survive. And somewhere along the way, I became fluent in hope. Applause followed. But I barely heard it. I was already thinking about my next essay. The day I received the email from Professor Reyes, I reread it 10 times to be sure it wasn't a mistake. Subject: Cambridge Translation Fellowship. Preliminary approval. Dear Ms. Chin, your submission has been formally reviewed by the Literary Translation Initiative Selection Board. We're pleased to inform you that you've been accepted into the fall term of our Cultural Literature Residency Program as a guest scholar. Please prepare your travel documents and notify us of your arrival window. Warmly, Professor Daniel Reyes. My hands trembled as I scrolled to the bottom. There it was, unmistakable. The university crest, the committee stamp, the signature in black ink. I had never stepped foot outside the country. And now I was being invited to the university I used to see only on stamps and page margins. I packed lightly: essentials, dictionaries, 3 well-worn paperbacks, and 1 folder full of translations. My hands hovered over a small photo of my parents before I tucked it deep between my notebooks. When my plane landed in London, it felt like I had stepped into another world. One filled with rain-polished cobblestones, Gothic towers, and languages I could only half understand. The cold bit through my coat. My spoken English was solid in classrooms, flawless on paper, but shaky when asking for directions in a real-world accent that bent syllables like metal. I got lost twice before finding my dormitory. The room was small but warm. A twin bed, a desk by the window, and a stack of welcome folders. On the second day I finally met him in person. Professor Daniel Reyes was nothing like the formal voice in his letters. He wore a navy cardigan, wire-framed glasses, and a smile that suggested he had read 10 books that day and liked all of them. "Miss Chin," he greeted, offering his hand. "Or should I call you Liana?" "Liana's fine," I said awkwardly. He sat down across from me, clasping his hands. "You have something rare. You don't just translate. You feel. That's the hardest part." I smiled faintly. "Your submission on Dust Beneath the Orchid Tree was brave. Raw. Almost too raw." I nodded. I didn't know how else to write it. "That's good. Don't sanitize pain just to make it palatable for the West," he said. "They've read enough fiction. What they need is truth, wrapped in story." I didn't know it then, but that line would stay with me for years. The weeks that followed weren't easy. My classmates in the program came from elite institutions. Some spoke 4 languages. Others had publishing contracts. They were kind mostly, but distant. I spoke less in workshops. I didn't know how to jump in when someone quoted Rilke or debated Russian prose structure. One night after seminar, I stayed back to ask Professor Reyes a question. He watched me pack my bag slowly and said, "You look like someone translating more than just literature." I paused. "Sometimes I think I'm still trying to translate myself." He smiled. "Keep at it. You're doing fine." My first project was a collection of letters between a revolutionary poet and his exiled lover. The original text was brittle with loss, censored lines, unfinished thoughts. I stayed up late in the library, cross-referencing idioms, brushing strokes of meaning like paint across 2 worlds. But something was missing. Reyes noticed. "Technically perfect," he said, tapping the margin. "But emotionally, closed off." I didn't want to overstep the original. "Translation isn't math. It's music," he replied. "If the original is a cello, don't give me a piano. Give me a cello in your own tone." I went home that night and cried. Not because I had failed, but because I finally realized why it mattered to me so deeply. I wasn't just translating someone else's letters. I was rewriting mine. To Adrian. To Celeste. To everyone who ever told me to be quiet. Back home, my name still floated through WeChat messages like a scandal. Screenshots of my article resurfaced every few weeks. Anonymous users posted. "She thinks she's someone now just because she speaks English. Betrayed the family who raised her. What a joke. She doesn't deserve that scholarship. She cheated her way in." Sometimes I wondered if they even remembered what I looked like, or if I had simply become a rumor in their mouths. But I didn't respond. "Not this time," said I wrote. My first original piece was a short story titled The Weight of Clean Floors. It was about a girl who learned the meaning of every floorboard creak in a house where she was neither guest nor owner. She was invisible until she learned to speak her pain in another language. Reyes read it twice. "It's not perfect," he said. "I know. But it's powerful. And that's a better place to start." We submitted it to a literary journal. A small one. I didn't expect much. But when I saw the acceptance email 3 weeks later, I screamed into my pillow. My words. In print. Under my name. Not Celeste's. Not Adrian's. Not borrowed. Not stolen. My spring in Cambridge came softly, petals on old stones, students sprawled on the green. One afternoon I sat in the library translating a folk poem about girls threading needles in the dark. The metaphor hit too close. I paused. I thought of my mother, who died before I learned the names of constellations. My father, who left me his poetry but not his answers. And me, the girl who bent over too many sinks trying to rinse away her need to be loved. I picked up my pen and began a new sentence. Not from someone else's book. From mine. Professor Reyes called me into his office before term ended. "I've nominated you for a new program. One of our affiliate grants. It's competitive, but I think you have a shot." I stared at him. "Why?" "Because you're translating grief," he said. "And the world needs more stories that don't pretend it's pretty." That night I walked along the river Cam with my jacket tight around my shoulders. The moon shimmered on the surface like a poem I hadn't yet found the words for. I didn't know where my story would go next. But for the first time in both lives I didn't feel trapped. I didn't feel forgotten. I felt translated. Whole. The year I turned 27 I published my third translated collection. This one a mix of post-war poetry from rural China and contemporary memoirs from displaced women across Europe. The reviews were small but sincere. Some called it brutally elegant. Others said my style hovered somewhere between fire and forgiveness. One critic wrote, "Liana Chen translates with the sharpness of someone who's had to rewrite her own life." That line made me pause. Not because it was true, but because somehow someone had seen that truth without me telling it. I returned home to China during the spring term of my doctoral program. The University of Cambridge had offered me a guest lecturer role for the following year, and the Ministry of Culture had invited me to deliver a talk at Tsinghua University, my old dream school. Only this time they addressed the invitation to Dr. Liana Chen, Department of Comparative Literature, University of Cambridge, UK. I read the header twice before setting the paper down. I wasn't the girl at the post office anymore. My uncle met me at the airport holding a bouquet of yellow lilies and nervously patting his balding head. "Liana," he called out. "It's really you." We hadn't spoken face to face in years, but I had wired money to him occasionally. Small amounts without explanation. Enough to help his daughters get through university. Enough that his wife, my aunt, could no longer claim I was ungrateful. Now she clutched my hand tightly at the gate like we had never fought. "You've grown so beautiful. Look at your skin. Like porcelain." I smiled politely. "Jet lag suits me." They laughed, unsure if it was a joke. At home, the dining table was covered with dishes I hadn't tasted since childhood. Lotus root soup, sesame rice rolls, braised fish with ginger. My cousins hugged me like I'd always been their closest sister. But beneath the warmth I could feel something circling, like steam before a storm. During dinner my aunt leaned in with a too bright smile. "Now that you're back, don't you think it's time to settle down? You're a well-educated woman respected abroad. Surely you're thinking about marriage." I sipped my tea saying nothing. She took my silence as encouragement. "You know, Adrian has been helping out at our house now and then. Fixing the old windows. Carrying groceries. Very helpful. Very different now." I let my cup clink gently against the saucer. "Really?" "Yes," she said, voice dropping to a whisper. "And he never did end up with Celeste. She ran off with some Hong Kong investor. Left him with debt and heartache." She leaned closer. "He never stopped talking about you, you know. Never." "Fascinating," I murmured. "I'm just saying, if you still have feelings for him we can negotiate a proper match. Set the record straight. Ask for a better bride price. Everyone wins." I set my chopsticks down. "Auntie," I said with a practiced calm, "the only thing Adrian ever gave me was a stolen acceptance letter and a lifetime of silence. And you're talking about bride price." She flinched. I didn't mean it that way. You meant it exactly that way. I pushed back my chair and stood. Please don't speak for my future using the currency of my past. I stayed in a hotel near campus the next day. Tsinghua University looked different now. Brighter, fuller. Or maybe it was just me. My ID badge read visiting faculty, and students smiled as they passed, not knowing that a few years ago, I'd cried outside these very gates, begging someone to believe I existed. My talk was well attended. Students asked questions in fluent English. A few had read my essays in translation journals. Afterward, one girl waited until the crowd cleared. Dr. Chen, she said shyly, you once wrote about how silence is also a language. How did you stop letting it speak for you? I looked at her, young, sharp eyes full of too many questions. I didn't stop, I said. I just rewrote it. Later that week I returned to my uncle's house briefly to say goodbye. It was there, standing near the plum tree in the courtyard, that I saw him again. He looked older. Not in years but in weight. His hair had thinned. His shirt hung loose like he hadn't washed it properly in weeks. He carried a plastic bag of fruit and froze when he saw me. Liana, he said softly as if unsure he had the right. I didn't move. It's been a long time. Yes, I said. I've been reading your work. I didn't reply. He cleared his throat. Celeste left a long time ago. I'm not even angry anymore. He did what she had to. Maybe we all did. I turned slightly. Are you looking for forgiveness? No, he said quickly. I'm looking for a second chance. His voice faltered. Not just with you, with life. I've made mistakes. I lost everything. But I remember you, Liana. I remember you sitting by the window copying English sentences with your finger, even when I laughed at you. I stared at him. You always tried, he said. Even when I didn't deserve it. You're right, I replied. He stepped forward. We could start over. You're successful now. I wouldn't hold you back. We could. Adrian. He stopped. I looked him in the eye calmly. You never loved me. You loved having someone who didn't ask you for anything. His mouth opened. Closed. I used to think if I just waited longer, worked harder, you'd notice. That maybe one day I'd be enough. You were, he whispered. No. I was available, I said. Not loved. Just useful. The plastic bag in his hand sagged. One apple rolled out, bouncing off the dirt path. I'm not angry anymore, I added. I'm not even sad. But I don't owe you a happy ending just because mine turned out well. He looked stunned. So that's it. Yes, I said, stepping past him. That's mercy. I could have crushed you with the truth. But I chose peace. I walked away. He didn't follow. And I didn't look back. That night as I packed for the airport, my aunt knocked gently. I didn't mean to push you, she said quietly. I just thought you might want something familiar. I do, I said. But not from the past. She nodded. And for once said nothing else. As the plane took off, I looked down at the city below. Where I once lost everything. Where I once forgot how to dream. Now I was flying back to a life I built with my own hands. Adrian Wu could keep his apologies. The relatives could keep their gossip. I had become the woman they couldn't replace. The hospital rooms smelled like iodine, loneliness, and wilted chrysanthemums. I hadn't meant to come. I told myself I wouldn't. I even crumpled the note twice before flattening it again. The one he sent through a neighbor, because he no longer had a phone or maybe no longer the pride to call. Liana. I know I have no right. But it's stage 3 now. They say there's time, but I know there's not. I just want to see you before I go. Not to beg. Just to remember what I ruined. If you come, I'll be here. Room 408, East Wing. If not, I'll understand. Adrian. I didn't come because I owed him anything. I came because closure deserves a witness. He was thinner than I remembered. Skin clinging to cheekbones. Hands trembling where they gripped the blanket. He looked up slowly. And smiled. You came. I didn't sit. I stood by the doorway, arms crossed. His voice cracked like paper. You look like someone I used to dream of being. You look like someone who used to take without asking, I replied. He chuckled hoarsely. Still sharp. I missed that. I didn't. He winced, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something real. Not regret. But recognition. You're a professor now, huh? he rasped. Cambridge. Jinghua. You made it. Without me. I made it in spite of you. He nodded. Fair. There was silence. Outside, a nurse laughed down the hallway. I used to think I was the smartest person in the room, he whispered. But maybe I was just the loudest. You were, I said. Another pause. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he murmured. I just wanted to see your face again. To know the girl I left behind didn't stay behind. I walked to the edge of his bed, not too close. Do you remember what you said to me? I asked. The day you left for the overseas program? He blinked. You said, if you really cared, you wouldn't make this about you. His lips parted slightly. You made everything about you, Adrian. Even now. Even this letter. Even this goodbye. He tried to sit up straighter but failed. I'm dying. I know, I said quietly. And I hope before that happens you remember something else. I didn't become who I am because you left me. I became her because I chose to stop waiting for you to come back. His shoulders slumped. He had no more defenses. And I had no more rage. Only peace. I wish you kindness, I said. Not reconciliation. Just kindness. For what's left. Then I walked out. And this time I didn't look back. Months passed. The seasons turned. The news came one morning, through a classmate of a cousin of a neighbor. Adrian Wu had passed away quietly in a county hospital. No obituary. No headline. Just a name filed away. Once his absence had destroyed me. Now it didn't even leave a dent. My life moved forward like sunlight on a steady tide. My first book of original essays was published under the title, The Voice That Wasn't Borrowed. It sold modestly, translated widely, and was shortlisted for a Cultural Heritage Award. One evening, during a campus symposium, a young student approached me. She held my book to her chest, eyes wide. I read your chapter about language being a weapon and a bomb, she said breathlessly. I want to be a translator too. I smiled. Then start with your own story, I told her. Translate that first. On a rainy autumn afternoon, I returned to Jinghua's lecture hall as faculty. Not a guest, not a mistake, not an accident. I stood behind the podium and looked out over rows of students. My voice didn't tremble. My name, I said, was once used by someone else. They stirred. But I took it back. Not by fighting them, but by writing me. The lights were soft. The air still. I am not a tragic story. I am not revenge in a nice coat. I am not what they made of me. I breathed in. I am what I made of me. Applause built like quiet thunder. Somewhere in the middle row, a girl with dark hair and sharp eyes wiped her glasses. She looked like someone I might have been. Once. Afterward, I returned to my office and set a new manuscript on the desk. A memoir. Titled, The Goodbye That Finally Meant Goodbye. The dedication page read, For the girl who waited by the mailbox. You were always the author, they just borrowed your ink. I closed the file. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was healing from anything. I was just living. With my name. My voice. And my legacy. The end.